If we go back to your overall top 20 list, who isn't AI related or defense tech related that you think is standout there? I guess Stripe, just like boring old payments, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, look,
Right.
that's exactly it. And they're in the news talking about potential acquisition of PayPal.
Right.
So
Acquiring PayPal, maybe, right?
yeah,
Might
which
put
is
Ramp also in that fintech category,
yeah,
basic stuff. Maybe you could put Revolut there too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think these companies
and
are getting overlooked now, and yeah, they look more, yeah, approachable from a multiples perspective as well. Um,
right.
yeah, at least relatively speaking, less hype, but a lot of interest, like a lot of impressive performance.
We mentioned the softening in some of the software company demand. That's the perception that maybe AI is touching those companies like Canva and Rippling. Seem to be quality businesses that could be interesting as demand softens there.
What's your take on the overall SaaS apocalypse effect on, non AI or, maybe not originally AI businesses? Do you feel like that's calmed down a little bit, or there's still, pressure on SaaS companies because of SaaS apocalypse sort of, you know, I don't know, Claude taking over everything as soon as they announce a vertical plugin?
It's still in the minds of people in the market. I mean, we are seeing
Yeah.
softness in these names, and I think but that's also could be an opportunity. So I think people just aren't sure without perfect information.
Figma had a pretty good quarter and, didn't necessarily come back to where it was before, the last 6 months. I think it's been falling down pretty considerably from the IPO.
Yeah.
But maybe at least a little bit of recovery in the markets from the last month or so. I think it's up 30% in the last month, even though, down 20% over the last 6 months. I think the revenue multiple was, somewhere between 8 to 10, which is a little higher than the median for sure. I think that a lot of the pressure on Canva's price was based on Figma going out at a big number when it went public, but then falling considerably over the subsequent 6 months. And maybe there was at least a little bit of a recovery from Figma based on the recent quarter announcements. I don't know that we've seen a dramatic recovery in Canva's secondary trade price. I think there's still probably, last secondary trade for Canva shares, I think was done at 42 billion, and
Hmm.
seems like the market's trading it a little bit below that. But I wonder if that's a buy opportunity. Again, full disclosure, we're behind that, so I'm talking my book here, but does feel like that one's a bit of a buy. Going back to that list of newcomers or companies that are on the ones to watch. Um, what else on this list? OpenEvidence and Harvey are sort of software verticals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Vertical AI. Um, that's definitely been a theme that's been emerging. I think there's questions around defensibility um, there, but to the degree that Harvey gets entrenched in big law, open evidence is already ubiquitous in clinical medicine. It gets hard to rip them out after a while if they build brands. But yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
competition in both spaces.
And I guess applied intuition is a combination of software and hardware, and maybe Skilled is trying to offer a default OS for robotics, correct? Correct?
Yeah, yeah, like a multi-form factor brain for robots. And it has competition as well there, like Physical Intelligence, Kun's company.
Going back to maybe our overall list, at some point in the next 6 months, I expect Anthropic will go public and go out of our rankings. I think the same thing will happen to OpenAI. That might be Q4, might be Q1 or later. What does that list look like once those two big outliers are out? Is there any less concentration? It felt like the list was getting more and more concentrated when we were talking about SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic. Once those three are not in the mix, you don't have trillion-dollar companies sitting around there anymore, maybe with the exception of ByteDance, heading that direction. Now it's a lot more companies that are maybe in the 25 to $200 billion range. Do you think it gets less concentrated, or you still think we're going to have more concentrated effect in the overall market?
Well, just speaking to the data, we already saw a big downtick in concentration just with SpaceX leaving the list, even with Anthropic and OpenAI still there. Um, so, I think in a way it's healthy, right? To make room for other names. They've been, concentrating a ton of the activity. Right now, I think the aggregate market cap of the Power 20 is like, 2/3 OpenAI and Anthropic. That'll make room. That'll make room for, physical AI, for the software layer beyond foundation models.
What do you guys think is the number of companies that make up half the market volume? What's the number of companies that make up 80% of the market volume? It felt like we were getting to less than 5 companies that were half the overall trading volume. Is that now not the case, or is that still the case?
No, I mean, it's gone down. I think the top 6 names were at nearly 50% of all the activity that, that we see, not just within the Power 20, but across all of the Augment platform. And now it's one third of activity. So from a peak to nearly 50, it's kind of like almost to the level where it was before things got crazy, right around,
Right.
Q4 24. It's back to that level. And so, yeah, if OpenAI and Anthropic leave, we could see the most broad-based, secondary private markets that we've seen, certainly for the last few years.
Going beyond that top 20, I've heard previously from other folks that like the top 30 names made up 80% of the market volume. Do you think that expands any further again, or is it still going to be the top 10 names are half the market, top 30 names are, 80% of the market, even without, those big 3 in the mix?
If you think about a percentage of a company's market cap trades per year, I mean, removing these big trillion-dollar companies definitely has an impact on the volume. I can see Databricks and Stripe kind of becoming those next big companies that will trade big volume. I don't know. I see that it's starting to diffuse a bit. I could see 50 companies making up 80% of the volume.
Any thoughts about whether you would expand your Power 20 to Power 25, Power 30? Like, why 20 companies?
Yeah, we landed there, I guess, a few years back. It's funny because there's names we like that the data shows that's like they're quite strong signals.
Not to mention other folks in the market, but other groups whose role the nameless listed
Yeah.
top 30 companies or top 50 companies.
I think it's nice to have an elite, that kind of, gives you constraints. You have to like kind of forces a cutoff. It felt like, this is something that people can get their arms around. It forces a real bar in terms of, whether they can make it in or not.
Okay, guys, I think we've covered most of your list here, but I'd love to ask you for one bold prediction, either about a trend or a company. What should our audience keep in mind for, upcoming Q3, and what's a notable sort of observation or prediction you'd be willing to make?
Yeah, I think I'd go with sort of data center adjacent kind of technology plays. Like we saw Crusoe go up 6 spots in the rankings. You have Armada on our honorable mention list that is, building modular data centers for sort of, industrial and defense environments. I think that this whole idea of making, compute easier to build, more efficient, faster to build, et cetera. I think, this kind of like, nitty gritty infrastructure play, I think we'll see more companies rise in the rankings as a result, not just Crusoe and Armada.
What I'm hearing you say is picks and shovels, baby. Picks and shovels.
Yeah, I should have just said that.
But picks and shovels for AI data centers, picks and shovels for defense tech. Adam, how about you? What's your crystal ball projection for the next couple months?
I think just paying attention to open source and how that filters into the foundational model of margins, and then ByteDance could be the next trillion-dollar company outside of OpenAI and Anthropic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. I think they could be the next trillion-dollar company. I guess one more comment on Marcelo's observation. Did you guys see that there was a big acquisition that just happened by Elon? Not SpaceX, not Tesla. He acquired $1 billion gas turbine company, mainly just because he can move them around to the data centers for power. APR Energy was $1 billion acquisition by Elon, not either of the companies, and very quiet, wasn't announced.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, kind of a personal play there.
A fleet of mobile gas and diesel turbines so they can move them around to different data centers. I think that was what he was getting sued for, like exceeding the regulatory oversight of how many they'd spun up. So definitely fits your picks and shovels thesis there, Marcelo. I think we're energy constrained and grid constrained on some of these businesses.
Yeah, yeah, and people are, there's a backlash and a political element too, which doesn't,
Huge.
and we
Yeah.
shouldn't build them, but it means that the more efficient they can get, the less impact they can have on the rest of the grid, the easier it'll be to to build out those megawatts.
Yeah, I think even some companies trying to get out in front of the bad press by saying they'll subsidize the cost of electricity wherever they're building out stuff. And I think some states already like outlawed further growth of like I don't know, power consumption data centers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
I
lot
don't know
of
whether it's Massachusetts or somebody else, but somebody had.
Yeah.
Could be an election issue.
That's right.